You ready? Parshas Vayetse. Vayetse Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harono. Yaakov left Beersheva vayelech Harono. So Reb Zalman Sorotzkin, in the Oznaim La Torah, that's the sefer he wrote, a Pirush on Chumash called the Oznaim La Torah. He says that when Yaakov left the first time, he went to Beis Medrash Shem Ve'ever. And he was there for 14 years. Then he came back home. Back home to Yitzchak and to Rivka. I guess to, number one, see what was going on and see what was going on with Esav. When he found out that Esav was still angry and plotting his revenge, so then Yitzchak said to Yaakov, go to Lavan and find the wife. And then he left from there back to find the wife. So he had left, he was away for 14 years, he came back. Let's put things in perspective. How old was Yaakov when he took the brachos from his father?
30 something?
No.
So people think he was in his 20s, a teenager, 30s. He was 63. Okay? He was 63. Yitzchak, let's figure it out. Yitzchak got married when he was 40. He had the children when he was 60. And when he gave the brachot, he was 123. The Gemara says, why did he give the brachot at 123? Because when you reach within 5 years of the death of a parent, you've got to be worried maybe your time is coming. It seems that within 5 years, in either way, there's like the sword hanging over your head. So when Yitzchak turned 123, he felt he was within 5 years of Sorah 127. So he was worried. In the end, Yitzchak lived the oldest. He died at 180, within 5 years of Avraham, 175. So Yitzchak was 123, which means that Yaakov and Esav were 63. Okay? So it's very bizarre. Yaakov's, his behavior doesn't sound like a person who's 63 years old. That's a mature person. Sounds more like the teenager in him. Okay? Then, if you figure that he's 14 years Beis Medrash Shem Ve'ever, now he's 77.
Wow.
And when he finally marries Leah and then Rachel,
80.
he's 84.
Wow.
And how old were they? They were 22.
Wow.
Whoa. Right, sometimes
The granddaughter.
You're right. Sometimes the boy is 10 years older than the girl, and that's a little bit crazy. 22 to 84, like 60 some odd years difference. It's a lifetime.
3 times more.
Right, 3 times more.
Granddaughter.
Rachel and Leah looked at Yaakov like a father or grandfather.
Grandfather.
Almost 4 times.
Right. So ages are very funny here. It's very strange. Then think about it for a moment. Esav, let's plot his life. He learns in yeshiva in the early years. Then he goes out, he's a big hunter. At age 40, he gets married, has a bunch of kids. And now he's getting the brachos from his father. So he's an accomplished person. Yaakov is 63 years old, still living at home with mom and dad. What did Yaakov do all day?
Study.
Well, study where? In the first 15 years, he learned with his grandfather. But he only went now to Beis Medrash Shem Ve'ever. That was the yeshiva. There weren't many yeshivas. So from 15 until 63, it was like 50 years. He wasn't in business. He wasn't working. What was he doing? Reviewing, being mechadesh, learning by himself. His father was. I don't know if Yitzchak was learning with him. Yitzchak and Yaakov had no relationship. They had a very poor relationship. So there's these gaps that people don't think about it. Because when you read the Torah, the story seems to flow and you don't have a sense of time. But if you stop to think about it, imagine you had someone on your block, in your neighborhood, who was 63 years old and still living at home with mom and dad, never got married, never had a job, never went to school. It would be it's unusual. So I don't have answers to these questions. I'm just pointing these things out to you. Now, Yaakov goes, and he is becoming the Esav. He's going out into the world. The first time he's going out into the world. So the Medrash says, Al Kain Yazov Ishas Aviv Yezimo. Therefore, a person leaves his father and mother, and he builds a life with his wife. So Yaakov going out, everybody said he's going to miss his mother, he's going to miss his father. How is he going to survive? The answer is it's a pasuk in the Torah that you will survive. Yes. Everybody survives. You don't get married and go back and live at home. At some point, you got to leave mommy and daddy, and you got to go out on your own, right? At what that point is, I don't know, 21, 22, 23, everybody is different. Yes. But if you don't make the break early, and you're still 45, 50, and you're still living at home,
It's not good.
it's not good. It could mean that you're not marriageable material, that there's a problem. It's going to be very hard to get married, and it doesn't mean it's impossible. Nothing is impossible. Okay? So, Yaakov goes out, and he has this dream. And the Gemara says that when he wakes up, he says, had I known that this was the Beis HaMikdash area, I would never have gone to sleep. All the years I was a Beis Medrash, Shem Be'aver, he slept very little. He probably slept, but he never slept in a bed. Now, of course, the question is, if he didn't go to sleep, he would never have had this dream. Mm-hmm. He has this wonderful dream, and he realizes he's in a holy place, and he says, if I would have known I'm in a holy place, I would not have gone to sleep. Then he would not have had the dream. So, it's your own worst enemy. So the answer they give is that Yaakov would have said, no, I would have davened that I should have had this vision while I'm awake. Or maybe when I'm in a trance. I didn't have to be asleep to have this vision. So there would have been other ways to have this vision. But at any rate, it says, Vayikat Yaakov Mishnoso Vayomar. Yaakov got up from his sleep. And if you look at the last letters of those 4 words, it's a tzadi, beis, vav, and reish, tzibur, congregation, a minyan. So it says, a rem is here, when you daven with a minyan, ochein, you will notice, yesh Hashem b'malkam hazeh, Hashem is there. That when you have 10 people davening together, see, Vayikat Yaakov Mishnoso Vayomar. The last letter is Tzadi, Beis, Vav, Reish, Tzibur. If you daven with a minyan, a Tzibur, Ochein, you will realize Yesh Hashem B'Mokam Hazeh. Hashem is here. Because wherever you have a minyan together, the Shekhinah is there. Okay? So they bring a remiss from this pasuk, the importance of davening with the Shekhinah. Now,
what's pasuk number?
Pasuk number Tes Zayin in Perek Chof Ches 28:16. 28:16. Then it says as follows: Yaakov made a promise, "V'shafti b'sholom, I will come with peace, el beis Ovi, to my father's house." Now, there's a Gemara. The Gemara says, when you say to someone, do you say to him, Lech lishalom or Lech bishalom? So the Gemara says that if you say Lech lishalom, that means you'll be successful. Go to peace. But if you go with the peace, it means you're dead. It means that you're not growing anymore. David said to Achitophel, they said to Achitophel, Lech bishalom. Achitophel got hung, got killed. So they all asked the question, why would Yaakov use a term of death? I'm going to go bishalom. He should have said, I'm going lishalom, to peace. So the answer that they give is a very interesting answer. The reason Lech lishalom means you're going to grow. Yaakov said to Hashem, listen, I have no doubt in Lavan's house, I'm not going to grow. Because how can I grow with a guy like Lavan around? It doesn't make sense. My fear is, not only won't I grow, but when I come back after 22 years, what's going to be?
No, go worse.
I'll be worse. So he says, make me like a dead man. How I am today, that's how I should be in 22 years from now. Stable. Lech bishalom. I want to be today, and in 22 years, I want to be the same way. I don't want to be any different.
Getting worse.
Right? I don't want to get any worse. So that's what he says. The Pninim Yikarim says, that means I want to go with what I have. I shouldn't lose any kedusha. Okay, so he wanted to be the same. Now it's interesting. He goes, and who does he see when he gets there? he sees Rachel. Why is Rachel there? She's with the sheep. What was Rachel's job? She was a shepherd. Okay. So Lavan didn't have any sons. That's what the Medrash says. Lavan didn't have any sons, so the girls had to take care of the sheep. I got that. When Yaakov was there, Hashem gave a bracha to Lavan. He had sons. So eventually the sons took over and took care of the sheep. Great. Wonderful. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. He had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Why was Rachel with the sheep? Where was Leah? Leah was home.
It was her turn.
So you could say it was her turn. The Midrashim say differently. They say two reasons. One reason is Leah's eyes were very weak. She cried a lot. And being out with the sheep, you're out in the sun. Her eyes couldn't take it. So Lavan had no choice but to keep Leah at home. The second thing is, and this is for Sarah's purpose, you try to figure out the type of guy the girl is going to marry, and you prepare the girl for that guy. I'll give you an example. Lavan had two daughters, Rachel, Leah. Leah, Rachel. Assuming Leah was going to marry Esav, where was Esav 99% of the time? Out in the field.
Hunting.
Hunting. Well, if the man is out in the field, where does the wife have to be?
Home.
Home. So he trained Leah to be home. Okay? Let's reverse it. Yaakov. What was Yaakov? He was a kollel guy.
Home.
He was home all the time learning. Well, if he's going to be home learning, you got to have a wife who has a job who's going to go out and work. So Rachel was with the sheep. She was being trained in the job. You know, we talk about this all the time. So the fact that Leah was home was because that is the complements Esav. And the fact that Rachel is out in the field complements Yaakov. You know, we say that all the time. You know, if Sarah over there is dreaming about marrying a boy from Lakewood, like her brother, who's going to sit and learn in a kollel for the next 10 years. If that's her dream, if that's her dream, one second.
Say that.
If that's her dream, then when she graduates high school, where should she be headed to? College. She's going to have to learn a job because someone has to support the family, right? She's going to have to support the family. So either she's going to become an OT or a PT or medical billing, or she's going to become a nurse or whatever. If that's what she wants,
Teacher.
right? A teacher, whatever it is. But if she marries a guy and she goes out dating and the guy says, I'm looking for a wife who's going to be home with the kids. I don't want my kids raised by babysitters. I want a wife who's going to be home. Then number one, this guy better have a job, okay? If a guy is sitting and learning and says, I want a wife who's going to stay home, what's going to happen in that marriage? They're going to be in trouble. Okay, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You got to have some sense, common sense. So if the guy says, I want a wife who's going to stay home, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. But then the guy better have a job, better be a professional, better know what he's doing, better be able to bring home parnasa. Then this girl that he's marrying better be skilled. She better know how to cook and bake and clean because that's what he wants. If she goes out there and gets a job and is never home, and that's not what he wanted, the marriage is going to be in trouble because they didn't. Doesn't connect. You're missing the connections. So, very simply put, Leah was prepared to marry an Esav. Rachel was prepared to marry a Yaakov. Okay.
What woman she can have a part-time job?
She can always have a part-time job if it fits the family dynamics. My wife worked for many years part-time. Now she works full-time. You know, the house is empty. You know, and she'd rather work with screaming kids than stay home and listen to my phone calls. You know, she would rather just, and she'll tell you that honestly. You know, she just, you know, my phone calls. Sometimes my days are so crazy, she'd rather have 30 screaming kids at Beis Yaakov around her. But, you know, at least, you know, that's what it is. And Yaakov takes his role seriously. You know, he just finished whatever it was in the first 40 years of his life, I don't know. Then he goes to the yeshiva, finished there. Now he goes out into the world, and he takes his job. The first thing he encounters, the very first thing, is he sees all the shepherds gathered around the stone, and it's noontime. He says, what's going on? There's plenty of time. Let's go back to work, guys. Come on. And they would have said, who are you? But okay, they didn't say that. They could have said, who are you? But let's go back to work. So they said, no, yesterday we were caught off guard. The sun went, sat very quickly. Yaakov knew why. It was for him. So Yaakov basically said, that was an unusual situation. It's not going to happen again. So then they made some excuse. Well, there's a big stone over here. We all got to move the stone. Yaakov says, stone? 63-year-old guy, right? Actually, yeah, 63-year-old guy. 77. 77-year-old guy. Stone? What's the problem with the stone?
The fingers.
Pushes away the stone. So I don't know what but Lavan came running. When Lavan saw this, he came running. Okay? What's going on over here? Lavan came running. Then, of course, he sees Rachel, and he realizes this is the girl he's supposed to look into and look to marry, and he raises his eyes, and he cries. It's a fascinating whole interaction.
I heard it was her first time to came with the ships, no?
That I don't know. She was young. Maybe it was the first time. Maybe she was doing this on a regular basis. I really don't know. He doesn't do any tests. And, we talked about this before. It's interesting. When Eliezer came, he came with all the wealth. He had tons of money. Got a nice girl. Yaakov comes. How much money does he have with him? Nothing. But he got a nice girl. What does that tell you? Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor.
Yeah.
Right? If Hashem wants, you're going to get a nice girl. In my opinion, it talks about the girl is not really interested in your pocketbook. The girl is interested in what kind of a person you are. Your midos, your character, your nature. Are you sweet? Are you kind? I heard someone speak that girls don't want someone who's stingy. When you go out on a date, right? There was a question. It was in one of the shidduch websites. They had the question. You're on a date let's say the first date you have with a girl, not your first date, but with this girl's the first date, and you go into a restaurant, and you have a coupon, 10% off. Do you use the coupon?
No.
Lady or, the girl?
What's that? So this is fascinating. Okay, because I use coupons all the time. You see, I'm a funny guy.
Not the first time when you met your wife.
Well, I don't know if that's probably true. I use coupons all the time. The newspapers come, I cut out coupons, and I buy things with coupons. I go to CVS, my bill could be $80. By the time I finish using my coupons, I'm down to $40.
That is, yeah.
I go to Key Food, CVS, I use coupons all the time.
Why not?
I have an envelope, I put all the coupons in there, I know what I use. I don't cut every coupon, I don't know how to cut out the coupons I use. But if I'm using, I buy diapers and I get a coupon for Pampers, $1.50 off, I use it.
Yeah.
Better in my pocket than in someone else's, maybe, I don't know. So here's the question, and it was a fascinating question, because we had a debate around the table. What do you do? So a lot of people wrote in, don't use the coupon.
When you're dating girl.
When you're dating the first time when you're going out on a date, because the girl will think you're cheap.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is for a girl to think the guy is cheap. As a guy, I thought the girl would be very impressed. I manage money well. I save. If the meal costs $100 and it's 20% off, it's $20. We could buy a gift, a snack. Is that a bad thing? Is it a bad thing? They had a question one week. They had a question. Does it make a difference if the guy's shoes are slip-on or tie shoes? So one person says it has to be slip-on. Because if he has to tie his shoes, it takes him an extra 30 seconds. He should be learning Torah instead of tying his shoes.
But it's,
Do you have tie shoes or slip-ons?
when you go to work.
Tie shoes.
That's me.
That's it.
Forget about it.
You're out.
Yeah, but the big
You're out.
No, when they're hiring, they look if it's tie shoes.
Tie shoes are
So he's not lazy.
not lazy, you see? But the girl would say, nah, you should be learning Torah. He takes away 30 seconds every day because he has to tie his shoes. Go figure. There were other people who said he should use the coupon. One person wrote back, he should get up and when he gets the bill and pay to the cash register when she's at the table, and if she doesn't see, he could slip the coupon together with the credit card. This way he could use it and she won't know about it. Okay, so we're teaching the boy on the first date to lie and and hide things from his wife. That's the good thing, right?
That is good thing to hide from the wife.
We tell the guy, pay with a coupon, just don't get caught.
Yeah.
Right? That's good, right? In marriage, to teach a boy, do what you want, just don't get
This
caught.
is men's side of the job.
Right?
Don't
If
even
your
want
wife
to
is
wife.
gonna do that to husband.
It would be terrible, right? But, I mean, and because being cheap is a very, for a guy, if a girl sees a guy that's very cheap, it's not good for the marriage. It's just not good. Now, that doesn't mean you spend whatever you don't have. You have to be responsible. But it's a certain character.
Budget cares.
It's a certain character.
Reasonable.
Yeah, it has to be reasonable. Everything has to be with a balance. But you see, there's no clear answer. Do you use coupon or not? It sounds crazy,
Some
right?
places, yes.
You can go bowling, you can get one of these coupons. You get a coupon where you can get bowl for 2 hours for $12. I'd rather spend $35 for 2 hours, I'd rather spend the $12. I mean, why it's so terrible about that? But everybody said, no, don't do it, don't do the lure, it's a terrible thing. Okay,
What means stingy, you said?
Stingy that they eat.
right? So that's what it is. Okay.
Haisa.
Now, it says that Yaakov, there's an interesting medrash. The medrash says that the first Beis HaMikdash was built b'schus Avraham Avinu, but because he had Ishmael, it was destroyed. The second Beis HaMikdash was built b'schus Yitzchak Avinu, but because he had Esav, it was destroyed. The third Beis HaMikdash will be built b'schut Yaakov Avinu. Okay, Yaakov Avinu. And because everybody of Yaakov's children, the 12 Shvatim, were all Shiftei Kor, saintly, God-fearing people, that Beis HaMikdash will be built, will last forever. Okay, Yaakov became known as the Bechir HaAvos, the chosen of all the fathers.
Great.
So we have Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and we have the three Batei Midrashos.
So first one for
For Avram Avinu,
second for
Yitzchak,
and
and the third one is for Yaakov. It's just interesting how it breaks up in all different ways. Now, when Yaakov gets to the house, he says, I'll work for Rachel for 7 years. Now, why 7 years? I mean, why not 7 months? Why not
1 year, 2 years.
1 year, 30 days, So one opinion is that Rachel was only 5 years old at the time, plus 7 would make her 12, at least she would be of an age to be married. But most people hold she was 22 when he married her, so that's a little bit hard. Some people say that he noticed Leah wasn't married. So he says, let's take 7 years, I'll work for you. Maybe Leah will get married in those 7 years. Even though Leah was just a minute or two older than Rachel, so they were twins, but Yaakov was sensitive to the fact that Leah was single. Let Leah get married, get on with her life, before I marry Rachel. So that was something that was interesting. Another opinion says, in America, if there's something called statute of limitations. If I find something and you don't claim it, let's say for 30 days, it's mine. But in some places, it's 7 years. After 7 years, if you don't hear of somebody, we can declare them legally dead. So Yaakov was running from Esav. He was afraid to get married. Because if Esav couldn't get him, he might go after his wife, go after his children, which is what happened at the end. So he figured, I'm going to wait 7 years. Let's see if Esav and his armies come. Because I may have to run away again. And I don't want to schlep a wife and children. So he waited 7 years. So 7 years was a reasonable time to determine if it was safe or not safe. Now, of course, we talk about Shidduchim again. When Yaakov saw Rachel the first time, what did Yaakov say to Rachel? Rachel said to Yaakov, I just want you to know, my father is a tricky guy. A tricky guy. Okay, he's a tricky guy. So what did Yaakov answer to Rachel?
I'm prepared myself.
I'm prepared. I went to yeshiva.
Yeah.
I know all the tricks. You think he's tricky? I'm trickier. Okay. Now, on a first date, if the guy says to the girl, oh, by the way, I heard your father is a little bit of a cheater. I just want you to know I'm not worried. I'm a bigger cheater than he is.
She's going to change the plan.
How's that going to go? That's what, again, I gave a lot of thought over here, and I was trying to think to myself, if I had these conversations going out on a date, What are you supposed to say? My father is in jail. He got caught stealing. He says, "Don't worry, I'm a stealer better than your father, and I won't get caught." I mean, what are you going to do? How do you say? How do these things? How do you say these things to a girl you think about marrying on a date? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. Let's move on. I just, the Torah, when you start looking into it a little bit closer and you read each pasuk,
Very hard to understand.
it's hard to understand sometimes. These stories are really the harder stories.
Anyway, they was relatives. Anyway, if Rachel doesn't say to him, anyway, he find out from his mom.
Sure. So
They
why?
relatives.
That's right. And they were
Why
relatives.
she need to
Popular.
скрывать от него?
Yeah.
как сказать?
See,
Hiding from.
and that's why Ashkenazim don't marry relatives. What do the Bukharians do? Do
Oh,
they marry
they love it.
relatives?
No, nowadays no.
Nowadays,
Before-
no.
Before
now
used to a
not.
lot.
But before,
Before,
cousins?
it was a lot.
A lot.
I know that.
Like
How did that work out?
Yaakov.
That is not good.
No, some of them work.
So, not healthy.
It was not healthy.
Of course not.
It was not healthy. Okay. Now, the first thing we do is we...
I know one family, they only married to own people. That's it. No,
That's
no,
it?
no outside.
No outsiders.
All money together.
Okay.
They want to go. Money go away.
Now.
Золото, богатство.
The next thing I found very interesting. It says, of course, Yaakov had children, Reuven, Shimon, then came Levi. And Levi would eventually be the one to take over Yaakov's job. Yaakov was the Bechor. He was going to do the Avodah and the Beit HaMikdash. Levi took it over. In most families, it was the firstborn that took over the responsibilities of the family. Here it wasn't. It wasn't Reuven, and it really wasn't Shimon. Levi stepped up. Even though Levi had a troubled childhood, Levi stepped up. It's very interesting that Levi became the one. And then, of course, Yehuda took over as the king. But Yaakov stayed. Yaakov didn't leave until Yosef was born. When Yosef was born, Yaakov says to his wives, to Lavan, "It's time for me to go. I'm going back home." Why? Rashi says, "Mishanolad sitno shel Esau." Yosef had whatever it was necessary to take care of Esau, which is interesting. Let's break it down a little bit. We know that Esau is Edom, and the Galut we're in now is supposed to be Galut Edom.
Yeah.
And who's supposed to take us out of this Galut? Mashiach ben Yosef. Right? According to a lot of people, Mashiach ben Yosef already came, because the threat to Israel is no longer the West. It's no longer Germany. It's no longer Edom. The threat to Israel is Yishmael. And Yishmael would fall to the hands of Yehuda ben David. So we know that we're supposed to be waiting for Mashiach ben Yosef, and then comes Mashiach ben David. According to many Gedolim, Mashiach ben Yosef has already come. Who he was, I don't know. He already came. And the West is no longer the threat. We're now in the last stage where the battle is against Ishmael, and Ishmael is a battle of East and West. He doesn't ally himself with the West very well, and Mashiach ben David has to come and take care of it. So that's fascinating. According to the Gemara, Edom is like straw, and Yosef is like fire. And fire burns straw. The Hebrew word for straw is kash, kuf shin, which is 400. When Esau came to march against Yaakov, he had 400 soldiers. And who was there to protect him was Yosef. So now, they ask, what was Yosef's power to defeat Edom, to defeat Esau? So I have here a very interesting answer, very unusual answer. Any battle that takes place in earth first takes place in Shemayim, right? Yaakov fought the angel before he had to fight Esau. He says in Shemayim, Esau goes before Hashem and says to Hashem, Yaakov should be destroyed because he's a liar. He's a cheat, he's a liar. He cheated me out of my firstborn, he cheated me out of my brachot, he acted inappropriately, he wasn't an ish emes, he's my brother, he didn't treat me like a brother should be treated. And therefore, in my opinion, I want Yaakov destroyed. And nobody has an answer to Esau because he's complaining that he was hard done by his brother. The only one who steps up with an answer is Yosef. Yosef comes up and says, really? That's it? He lied to you? He cheated you? How would you like brothers to punch you in the stomach and throw you in a pit with scorpion and snakes? And then, when they don't kill you, they sell you down to Egypt as a slave. And then some woman gets crazy about you and you end up in jail for 12 years. How would you like that? My brothers did that. And you know what? I forgive my brothers. And if I can forgive my brothers, you should forgive your brother. Because what they did to me was 10 times worse than what Yaakov did to you. And Hashem agrees. So until Yosef was born and lived his life, there was no answer to Esau. But once Yosef came on the scene, boom, we had an answer. You think you had it rough? You don't know what rough is. This poor guy thinks he had it rough. He had 2 brothers. I have 3 older sisters. Trust me, you didn't have it rough. Trying to grow up with 3 older sisters. I had no brothers. You know, I can tell you about rough. At any rate, you know, that's what it was. It's just so interesting how he came across, in that regard. Of course, we talk about Yehuda. Leah said thank you to Hashem because she got more than she deserved. Everybody said thank you. Many people said thank you to Hashem, but most people said thank you to Hashem when they got what they thought they deserved. Very rarely do you have someone who believes that they got more than they deserved. Leah says, I'm going to name my son Yehuda. I got more than I deserved. And of course, Yehuda has Hashem's name in it, Yud Kei Vav Kei. And every time she called Yehuda, she was saying thank you to Hashem. It's a very powerful statement. And that's why we call ourselves Yehudim, Jews, because of that. When did we start calling ourselves Jews, Yehudim?
From the Yaakov.
From Har Sinai. From Har Sinai, we were called Bnei Yisrael, but the term Yehudim was only after the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. In the story of Purim, in the Megillat Esther, you have the word Yehudim. Until then, you didn't really have it. So it's an interesting word, but you really didn't have the word Yehudim in any sense of the way. Okay, let's go a little bit further. At the end of the Parsha, and again, the stories are hard to understand because Rachel takes the idols, and whatever the reasons were, and she doesn't get up for her father, and Yaakov gets so angry, and he says, whoever took those idols should not live. One of the reasons why they say Rachel died when they entered Israel. The truth is, there's an old saying, last hired, first fired, in business. And Rachel was married second, so she died first. Leah died shortly thereafter. Rachel was 36 when she died. Leah was 44. Right? Yeah, so when Rachel died, Leah died before they sold Joseph. Had Leah been alive, they would never have sold Joseph, they said. So Rachel and Leah died very young. Bilhah lived a long time. Bilhah lived till they got down to Egypt. Zilpah, I don't know how much they lived. The one who lived the longest of all the mothers was Rivka. She lived to be about 121, 131. Maybe 131. Sarah lived to be 127. The women did not live long. Most of the women died first. Sarah died before Avraham, and Rivka died before Yitzchak, and Rachel and Leah died before Yaakov. Okay, so they died young. It says in the Pasuk, Vayashkim Lavan Baboker, he got up, he kissed all his children goodbye, and it says, Vayelech Vayeshev Lavan Limakomo. Lavan went and returned back to his place. That's an unusual term. V'Yaakov holach l'darcha, but Yaakov continued on his path. So it almost implies that Lavan went back to his old tricks, back to his place, but Yaakov was still on a high, still growing. And we know what happened. Yaakov kept getting greater and greater and greater. The next person he meets is the angels of Hashem coming back. So he leaves Lavan's house, and Lavan goes back to where he always was, and Yaakov goes back to seeing Malachim, angels.
So many years they was together, and Lavan learned nothing from him.
Correct. So let me tell you the answer. So the Medrash Rabbah says that the 22 years that Yaakov was there, Lavan did not worship idols. The minute Yaakov left, he went right back to his idols. Limakomo. Another opinion is that when Yaakov came, Lavan was a poor man. Nobody trusted him. He was a cheat. No one trusted him. When Yaakov came, he was a financial wizard, and Lavan became very wealthy. When Yaakov left, Lavan lost all his money. He went back to being poor again. The Heimek Dover, the Netziv, says, Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. It's a sign for the future. Many countries took Jews in. The countries became very successful. They threw the Jews out, and the countries went back to being impoverished and poor. Same as before. Rav Zalman Soroskin, he looks at the positive side. He says that Lavan was an important man. He was a nobleman. When Yaakov came, everybody looked to Yaakov. He was a new kid on the block. They liked Yaakov. When Yaakov left, everybody went back to Lavan. So Lavan became important again. So he looks at it from the positive side that Lavan remained important. But it really, they talk about the fact that when you go into a perfume store, the perfume gets into your clothes. When you walk out, you still can smell the perfume. It lingers. But with Lavan, as close as he came to Yaakov, the minute Yaakov left, nothing. Lavan went right back to being the guy that he was. He now had boys to take care of the sheep, but he did not grow at all. He did not become anything special. He went back to being whatever he was. Okay. We talked about this last week a little bit, Rochel Imenu's yard site. I wanted to share with you a story I saw. There's a few stories, time is running by. There was a story as follows. In 1950s, there was a fellow in Borough Park, a middle-aged guy, probably in his 40s or 50s. He wasn't married, which was very unusual. Although after the war, it was more common than we realized. And he was depressed, he's in his 50s, he's not married, doesn't have children, he has nothing to show for his life. And he came across a particular rabbi who looked very distinguished, and he starts crying his heart out to this rabbi. And this rabbi says to him, listen, he says, don't become disheartened. I see that you're going to get married, you're going to have a family, you're going to have children, and you're going to have a daughter. And I'll tell you what, when your daughter gets married, I'll come and dance at her wedding. And he was machazik him. He gave him, made him feel good. And the story goes that the man eventually straightened out his life. He actually got married, he had a daughter, and in the 1960s, word got out that the girl was engaged, and she was going to get married. Comes the wedding, and he's dancing in the middle, whatever, with the chassan, and all of a sudden this rabbi comes in, but not the same rabbi, a different rabbi, and he starts dancing with him in the middle of the wedding. After the dance is over, this man goes over to this rabbi, Shalom Aleichem, how are you? Who are you? It was very nice that you came to dance with me. He says, my name is Shner Kotler. My father, Rabbi Aaron Kotler, the Rosh Hashiva of Lakewood, was the rabbi you met some 20 years earlier. He says, that was your father? He says, your father, yeah. When my father got sick and knew he was going to die, he told me about you. And he said, I'm not going to be able to keep my word. I won't be able to dance at his daughter's wedding. But I want you to dance for me. And he said, I've been watching your family and watching your progress from a distance. And when I heard your daughter was getting married, I had to come. So when I danced with you, I was dancing with you on behalf of my father. Okay? That was Rabbi Aaron Kotler. Rabbi Aaron Kotler had a love for every Jew. Rabbi Aaron Kotler was, a man who, Lakewood today is built on the shoulders of the great Rabbi Aaron Kotler. So he brings down this story, this fellow, and he says that throughout life, people feel abandoned. There's sometimes people feel alone. Take Rochel, for example. She was a shepherdess. Where do shepherds thrive? They're out in the field. Who do they have for company? A bunch of sheep and sheepdogs. There's no one there. They're by themselves. When David HaMelech's family didn't want David HaMelech around, what did? They sent him out to the field. They forgot about him. When Shmuel comes and says, I want to make one of your children is going to be king, they give all the children. He says, that's it. Nobody left. Oh yeah, I have a son out in the field. His name is David. No, they forgot about him. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to hide from Paro, so he took care of Yisro's sheep. Where was he? Out in the field. People are isolated. When Rachel dies, Yaakov doesn't take her to Morat HaMachpelah, and he doesn't buy a fancy grave for her. He buries her where? Have you ever seen a picture of the old Kever Rachel? It's a little shed, and all around it is nothing. Empty field. Rachel was buried alone in the wilderness. There was nothing around for miles and miles and miles. And yet, if you stop for a moment and you think about it, Kever Rachel is probably the one place in Israel that is visited by more people than any other place. People from all over the world go to Kever Rachel to daven. Maybe the Kotel is a place that's busier. But I know many years I go to Israel. Sometimes I'll go to Morat HaMachpelah, to Hebron. Sometimes I won't. There's no real buses that go there. You have to take a private taxi. Depends on security. Depends on what's going on. But Kever Rachel, every year I go.
Real soldiers.
Right.
Take you.
So that's right.
So scared.
What about Leah?
Well, Leah is buried in the Morat HaMachpelah. So there are years that I don't go to the Morat HaMachpelah to daven. Some years I do, some years I don't. But Kever Rachel, every year.
Which country? Jerusalem?
Kever Rachel is in Beis Lechem, which is right outside Yerushalayim. Hebron is further. So it's fascinating. Here was the Rachel, who was the shepherdess, who was isolated, who was alone in the world, whose husband buried her all by herself, and somehow it is her grave that is one of the busiest places where Jews all over the world come in order to daven. So Reb Shneur Kotler basically said, no one is alone. No one is isolated. No one is alone. Everybody has a place. Okay, I have two more stories to share with you. Listen to this story, an unusual story. There is a Dayan, a judge on the Bet Din in London called Aharon David Donner, D-U-N-N-E-R, Dayan Donner. He speaks a lot of different places. He speaks all over the place. Last year when I was in Israel, actually his brother spoke in the hotel, was for Lakewood Yeshiva, and I was listening in. I found it very, very interesting. I was listening in to Dayan Donner, to his brother, who was a Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak, give a shir. He says as follows. He says that there was a old man who was a Holocaust survivor. He was in Buchenwald. That's where the concentration camp. And when he went to Buchenwald, he had a tallis under his shirt. He had wrapped himself in a tallis, and then he had a shirt over it. And that tallis he wore every single day. He smuggled that tallis in, and wherever he was sent, including Buchenwald, he never missed a day wearing that tallis and davening in that tallis. After he was liberated from the concentration camps, he wore that tallis every single day. Okay. When he passed away, the family buried him. But they didn't bury him in this tallis, they buried him in some regular tallis. Till they went through his papers. When they went through his papers, he had left a note. Whatever you do, I want you to bury me in this tallis. I wore this tallis every single day. I want to be buried in this tallis. So the family came to Dayan Donner on the yard site. It was the first yard site. It was already a year since he passed. And he says, we feel terrible. Because he left a letter, which we didn't see, that he wanted to be buried in this tallis. And we don't know what to do. Our grandmother, his wife, is elderly and her health is failing. Maybe when she passes, we'll put the tallis in her coffin. And she's going to be buried next to him will that count? Can we put the tallis in our grandmother's coffin? Even though she's a woman, and women don't get wrapped in a tallis, is that a good idea or not? So Dayan Donor didn't know what to do, so he said, let me ask Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, it's Godel Hador, in Bnei Brak, Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And he writes over here that he received the answer, and the answer stunned him, shocked him. Reb Chaim Kanievsky told him, dig up the grave, open the coffin, and wrap the guy in his tallis.
So nice.
Now,
After a year?
a year later,
1 year.
exactly. Exactly. He writes over here that he contacted some of the local Chevra Kadishas, and all of them wouldn't do it. They felt squeamish, uncomfortable. They just wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. So Dayan Donor said, maybe I misunderstood. Let me go back to Reb Chaim Kanievsky and let me ask him again. He asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Reb Chaim Kanievsky said the same thing again. Open the coffin and put the tallis on him. So when he said the Chevra Kadisha they won't do it, what about putting it into the grandmother's coffin? He said no. Then dig open the grave, don't open the coffin, but try to put the tallis in his grave, like on top of his coffin. Try to put the tallis as close to him as possible. So Dayan Donor said to him, why? He says, because when you go up to Shemayim, your mitzvahs by themselves don't tip the scale. The Mesirat Nefesh, your dedication, what you're willing to do the mitzvah, that tips the scale. This tallis testifies that even in his darkest time, Buchenwald, he wore it. This guy needs his tallis in Shemayim. Get that tallis as close to him as possible. That's what he told him.
Oh,
In Israel also burying in a coffin?
This was in England. But in Israel, they don't bury with a coffin. In Israel, they don't bury with a coffin. But in England, they do. And this was in England. Okay? I had a case. I've probably told you this. I had a case.
They did it.
What?
They put-
They did it. That's what they did. I had a case where a lady came to me, and she said to me that one of the rabbis, the local rabbis, referred her to me because her husband died in China, in Shanghai. Now, my father was a rabbi in Shanghai. When the Mir Yeshiva was in Shanghai during the war years, my father was the assistant rabbi to Rabbi Ashkenazi. Rabbi Ashkenazi was the rabbi in Shanghai. My father was the assistant rabbi. And he knew all the Mir Yeshiva boys very, very well. And she said that my husband died in China during the war, and we had the body cremated. Now, since my father was in Shanghai, this rabbi thought maybe I would know. The truth is, there were many people who died in China, in Shanghai, and they were buried in the cemetery. They didn't do cremation. Reformed Jews did cremation, but the Orthodox didn't do cremation. But it was the war years. It's hard to judge people during the war. And I want to know what to do with the ashes. Now, usually, if a person's cremated, we don't bury the ashes in a Jewish cemetery because he shouldn't have been cremated. It's one of the consequences. So I said to her, where is your husband's ashes? So she says, right here. And she had a bag, and she pulled it up, and she put it on my desk. She said, right here.
oh my gosh.
That was creepy. I gotta tell you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When they cremate and is they allowed to say Kaddish?
So normally we don't say Kaddish, we don't know none of that.
Nothing.
So now she's sitting in my office. She's a woman about 50. She's there with her daughter, and her husband is on the desk. Her husband's on the desk. Okay. Weird. Okay, got it. Got it. So I didn't know what to tell her. So I said to her, let me make a suggestion to you. After 120 years, when you pass on, let them put the ashes in your coffin, and they'll bury both of you together, And in America, when you have a grave, you put a headstone over here. But some people put by the feet what's called a footstone. So the headstone will have your name, and by the feet, where the urn is, you'll have your husband's name. And this way, when the kids come to visit, they can visit you and your husband, both parents together.
What about the ashes? Where they have to put it?
Just put it in the coffin. I mean, at your feet.
In the middle, by the feet? Or?
By the feet. Which was fine, because she
And
probably
so what?
stepped on him during her lifetime anyway.
And
You know, it's just,
it's kosher to put ashes inside?
normally we don't bury the ashes in a Jewish cemetery, but there was the war years, and I don't want to judge people that go through the Holocaust or the war. People made
But stressing because
stressful
She's
decisions.
still alive?
What?
That is right way to do
So that was my suggestion. That was what I said to her.
She's still alive?
She died 10 days later. 10 days later. The woman was in her 50s. She had a massive heart attack and she died. 10 days later, the family calls me up, and she said to me, Rabbi, thank you very much for your suggestion. We just did what you said. I said, what are you talking about? You just did what I said. Your mother is a young woman. She had a heart attack and she died. 10 days later.
she already know.
And she buried, and they put the ashes in the coffin. Now that's spooky. Okay? The last story.
But
You
it
ready?
was her husband, you said it was war times, but she's 50 years old. How
Yeah.
old was the husband?
The husband was not that old either. He died during,
When was it?
during the 40s. So she must have been like 20 or something. He wasn't that old. They were young people.
So he passed away when he was very young.
Yeah, he passed away very, very young.
25.
Yeah, my mother remembers, with all the lice and the diphtheria. My mother would tell me stories of all the diseases. People were dying very young in Shanghai. It was a horrible situation. People were starving. My mother, her parents had a restaurant, a kosher restaurant, where all these yeshiva boys came to eat. And the reason is because whatever was left over
And
afterwards,
she don't know
they
the
ate.
reason why they burned him?
No, I never found out the reason why. It wasn't because she was Orthodox. It was probably, it was war years. They didn't know what to do, or they didn't have money,
Yeah.
or he had diseases and they weren't going to bury them. They just did cremation. One more story. Listen to this story. There's a book out. I did not see the book. Someone told me the story over Shabbos. There's a book out written by someone named Yehoshua Leaf. Yehoshua Leaf I knew in passing, really not well. He had a yeshiva in Israel called Ner Yaakov. Eventually the yeshiva closed down. And he moved to Israel in the 1970s. I was in learning yeshiva in the 70s in Israel. And he had a car. And now it was unusual. Most people didn't have a car. So he, with his car, he was learning in Mir. He would drive the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir around and Rebbe Yoshev around. So he had all these stories of all these Rosh Yeshivas driving them around, that people hadn't heard. So he wrote a book, I guess, Stories of My Rebbe or something like that, where he wrote down all the stories of all these different Rosh Yeshivas, which he heard while driving them around all over Israel because he had a car. In the introduction to his book, he talks about his father. Now, his father was a rabbi in Baltimore, Rabbi Leaf. And I had heard Rabbi Leaf. Rabbi Leaf was a big Talmud Chacham. He had a beautiful library, and he loved learning, and he always learned. He would drop off his wife at the store. He would sit in the car he had a box in the car with books, and he would be learning in the books. His wife took her to the beauty parlor, drove her to the beauty parlor. She went to the beauty parlor. He was learning his books. Always learned his books. 24/7. He loved to learn Torah. That was what it was. At any rate, he had a massive heart attack, Rabbi Leaf, and they needed to do bypass surgery. And back then, not everybody did bypass surgery. It was a complicated surgery. And it was decided that he would have the surgery, I guess, in the Mayo Clinic, which is in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, the Rochester. And he flew to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to have the surgery. Now, he was going to be away for a few weeks, so he takes a box and he puts his favorite books inside, and he packs it all up, and he goes and he has the surgery. Surgery was successful. He's on his way back. He's flying. He's on the plane to come back. And the stewardess sees that he's a little bit uncomfortable. So she says, Rabbi, what's the problem? He says, well, I just had open heart surgery, and the seat's a little bit uncomfortable. She says, you know what, Rabbi, we have plenty of room on the plane. I'm going to put you in first class. And the stewardess moved him up to first class, which was very nice. He's sitting in first class, and across the aisle is an African-American fellow, 7 feet tall.
Oh.
And everybody is over him and talking to him and giving him drinks, and So he says to the stewardess, "Who's that guy?
Ask him.
Who's that guy?" So she says his name is Ferdinand Louis Alcindar. He says, "I've never heard of him." Well, he's the center for the LA Lakers, for the Lakers. And he has all these records. He owns all these records. He says, "Can I get his autograph?" So she says, "I don't think it's a good idea, Rabbi. He just became Muslim. And he just changed his name. I don't think he's going to give his autograph to a rabbi." What did he change his name to? Karim Abdul Jabbar. Right? Famous person, right? Famous basketball player.
Yeah, he'll be the
Okay. So, plane lands in Baltimore. Rabbi Leaf gets his suitcase, gets his box, gets in the car, goes home. As he's walking into his house, the phone is ringing. He answers the phone. It's the airport. What's the problem? Did you hear the story?
Wrong
Where
bag.
did you hear the story? From me, you heard this?
Wrong bag.
What?
Wrong bag.
He took the wrong box. He says, "I think, Rabbi, you took a box from the turnstile." He says, "Yeah, I took my box. I had a box of books." "Could you check that box?" Opens up the box, and there's this real fancy boom box inside. And he hears Karim Abdul-Jabbar screaming inside, "Which idiot took my box? I mean, why doesn't the guy, can he read my name?" So the rabbi says, "Okay, I'll bring it back to the airport." So the person on the inside says, "Don't worry, we're going to send a car to pick it up." So Rabbi Leaf says, "Okay, but do me a favor. When you come with a car to pick up the box, the boom box, could you bring me my box?" His books. She says, "Rabbi, there's no box here." He says, "What are you talking about? I took a box because I put a box on the plane." She says, "All the luggage has been claimed. There is no box. Now, if you lost the box, I can fill out a form, you'll get $50 back, whatever the payment is for the suitcase, but there is no box." Well, he is so upset, Rabbi Leaf, because these were books from his library that he treasured, and they were part of sets. He was so upset, you cannot believe it. This is what Rabbi Yeshua Liff writes in his introduction. He says, "My father, I never saw my father so upset." Anyway, they pick up the boombox, etc. A few days later, my father gets a phone call. "Is this Rabbi Leaf?" "Yes, it's Rabbi Leaf." He says, "I was traveling on the Beltway. Around Baltimore, there's a Beltway. And I found a box that was thrown and torn to pieces with books strewn all over the highway. And I caught my eye, and I pulled it, and it had your name inside. Are these your books?" He said, "I can't believe it. Those are my books." He says, "Well, I have them. I'm going to return them." He says, "Where did you find them?" "On the Parkway." "How could that be?" He says, I know it sounds crazy. It looks like somebody opened up the car door and just threw the books out the window, threw the books out the door, and they were just all over the highway." Anyway, he says in his introduction, he says, "I never saw my father get angry. My father was so angry that how could a person do that? How could he throw these books? These are holy books. These are Torah books. How could he throw them on the road? How could he throw them out a window? I can't believe it. How could anybody? What kind of a person would do that?" And then he said something that was uncharacteristic. He says, "I cursed the hand that threw out the books." 3 days later, this is from what's it called?
Wikipedia.
What?
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia. While remaining relatively injury-free throughout his NBA career,
Karim.
Abdul-Jabbar twice broke one of his hands.
Wow.
The first time was during a preseason game in 1974 when he was bumped hard and got his eye scratched. He got so angry, he punched the basket support. The basketball, he punched it, and he broke his hand. He was out for 16 games.
Good.
This happened 3 days after Rabbi Leaf got his books back. That's what he wrote in the introduction. And then Rabbi Shua Leaf writes, he says, I knew my father was great, but for him to say something and it should happen from Shemaim, he says, I didn't know how great my father was until I heard the story, he said, until I saw the story. You gotta be careful. These rabbis, some of them are powerful people. That's an amazing story. You know, Yaakov says, whoever stole the idols shouldn't live, you know? It just it came out, you know? It didn't mean anything, it just came out. It just came out. But that was that story. I found that to be an amazing story.
Oh, well.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.